All right, another episode of the Prospect Podcast. Listen, Coach, before I go into your whole background, which I'm going to dive into, me and Coach Depascale are from New Jersey, so we have to hit it with that club music to get it started.
I'm all into it. Trust me, I'm an '80s guy. Look, I'm an OG of that. I know when those songs started. And I've been in all those clubs.
Oh, yes, me too. So we have our coach, Greg Hudson. I still call him Coach, obviously. He's coached. He was my coach at UConn. He was the offensive line coach there. He wasn't my position coach, but he was the offensive line coach there back when Coach Holtz and him came to us from Notre Dame. He played football at Notre Dame. Was a linebacker there at Notre Dame. And then after that, he had an unbelievable career in coaching at East Carolina, won a bunch of games there. Did you go to South Carolina too? What Skip went?
No,
you did not.
I was at the University of Cincinnati.
Oh, okay. Who was at Cincinnati at the time when you went there?
Minner.
Oh, Rick. Oh, yeah.
Fantastic. At the time, there was this little kid that used to hide under my desk, play hide and seek, and his name was Jesse Minner, who's now the D coordinator for Harbaugh and did the Michigan.
Yes.
I've known him since he was in grade school. And, John Harbaugh, Rex Ryan, and Mike Tomlin all cut their teeth when I was there. So
it's unbelievable.
Amazing time. But that's where I was.
That was a great run they had back then, too. Ooh. I remember that.
Yeah.
And so then East Carolina, then you guys went to South Florida, right?
They went to South Florida.
Went to South Florida. You went to
Tallahassee.
Went to Florida State. That's what you were you a GA there as well too at one point in Florida State?
No, Skip was. He GA'd there, but I was there as assistant head coach and linebacker coach for Jimbo's first 3 years.
Yeah. And that was when and then you went off to Purdue and Notre Dame.
Yeah.
As a defensive coordinator there. And it's an amazing rise.
For you guys, I went to Cincinnati, and then I went to another great opportunity is I went to Minnesota, where Glenn Mason took a chance on me at 35 years old to be the coordinator.
Oh, wow!
Yeah. And
another phenomenal head coach.
And the best two guys I had playing, I used to say the best players I had on defense were Lawrence Maroney and Marion Barber. When they played good, I was sipping Gatorade on the sideline with the defense.
They were loads at running backs. Loads.
Killing people.
Literally. Physically. When we're talking physically like people.
Bowling.
They would man, I remember those two. Holy.
Yeah, we would hang 300 yards rushing on Michigan.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Along with knocking out half of their team because of how violent they ran. Woo.
Yeah, it was so much fun.
As a lifelong Cowboys fan, although suffering for the last many years, but when the Barbarian was on the Cowboys, it was.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a. Let me show you something.
Oh yes.
Oh,
this is how big of a Cowboy fan I am.
Oh, yes.
Now, the story behind that is Roger Staubach's my idol. He grew up 2 blocks from where I grew up in Cincinnati. We went to the same grade school. Obviously, I'm not 83 years old, 82 years old. But when I became the defensive coordinator, I got that gift from one St. John Eagle to another.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's unbelievable. He's Captain America stars. He was yep. Oh my goodness. It's Yeah. So that's you've been a Cowboys fan your whole life?
When they lost to the Rams to Jack Youngblood, I cried in the kitchen like a baby in 7th, 6th grade, maybe.
I was the same. I was the same way. It's funny growing up. Obviously, for you growing up in Ohio and being a Cowboys fan is an odd thing. I was growing up in New Jersey, where the Giants obviously were. It would be. I'd have to deal with every day in school. I'd be wearing my Cowboys shirt. I was a Tony Dorsett fan.
Yeah, in Cincinnati, you could be a Cowboys fan because of Roger Staubach.
Yeah, right,
Yeah,
right.
yes, you were granted special dispensation from the Pope to be a Cowboys fan. Roger Staubach. It was not a problem.
That's not a problem. That's phenomenal. When you guys came to Connecticut and you came
Yeah.
there, and Derek, me and Coach have stayed friends over these years.
Yeah.
Been able to get back in contact whether it's every couple of years it's amazing because Coach was his personality. First of all, let me put it like this: if you wanted to get fired up, Coach could get you fired. I mean, like when something was on the line, dude, he would get you fired up. Like, I mean, you were ready to put your head through the wall, And I was a linebacker when Skip moved me from fullback to linebacker, and he was on the offensive side. But I would hear him roar, and I was just like, I'm ready to run my head through the wall. And he, that's the linebacker obviously in him.
Yeah.
Yes, and he had some great. The lines you had were just phenomenal when you were there. Even my senior year, even though my senior year we did not do as we were 5 and 6 because a lot of crazy things happened that year.
Yeah.
But the lines you had though every single year were just
gnarly. I mean, when we went down and dropped 406 yards rushing on Yale after they had beat us the year before. I mean, I'll never forget that. But that was at a time that I got so lucky to be with Joe Moore, to be his GA, and now being on the board and a voter and very granular in that award with Aaron Taylor, who I got to coach before I came to you guys and learn. I spent a whole year every single day with Joe. And but the guys that would come in and visit with us, from Tony Wise, the Dallas Cowboys line coach, I mean, Jimmy Johnson and head coaches from the NFL would send their line coach to Notre Dame, and I'd sit there and just take notes. And Billy Callahan was and Huber were the line coaches at Wisconsin, and they would come in. And Harold Mudd and Dan Radakovich and, these guys that were with the Steelers, and all this zone blocking was really starting to really come on with the Bengals. And, I'm from Cincinnati, so I had connections. So I was surrounded. So I just tried to emulate what they taught me and put it into the structure of the guys we could get at UConn, which were just, we knew we didn't have a strength and conditioning and nutrition programs back then. So we just said, get the biggest freaking guys you can and get them in as good a shape as they can get, and just get tough guys. And we just would try to maul you. And when you can run the power and still run the zone play, and that's what made us great at Minnesota. I remember after my first year, Glenn Mason came to me. He said, "You're a line coach." He said, "I really think we need to get the power back in our offense." I said, "We'll win a championship or have a chance if you put the power back in and run it." And we just started killing people, because they would be so worried about us splitting them on the power. We would fillet them on the stretch. And that's what we did, and then we had a bunch of good, tough backs. Do you want a great line and an average back, or do you want a great back and an average line? I'll take the line. Give me that Torrey Taylor, and then just give me a bunch of guys like Dan Jones that just want to go hard.
That's right.
And Pat Walsh, who would just cry his way to getting the job done, I act like I was going to fight him in the locker room and turn around and start laughing. Just to get him going. But
Derek, he was 6'9", 3. Well, what would you say, about 330, 3?
Yeah,
6'9".
But when that wasn't like a thing, right? Like
that
wasn't like it wasn't 6'9".
Nobody 6'9".
When we walked Walshy and Jones and Sherrard and Tavar,
he was 6'7".
First couple guys off the bus, right?
Yeah, when they would just and I would tell them, I said, you got to look cool and intimidating going up to the line. I mean, we practiced how we broke the huddle and came up to the line just to be a little arrogant, just to give them some juice and self-worth for themselves.
Right.
I was trying to stimulate them about how they felt about themselves. Because once they were confident, what comes first, success or confidence, and I was confident. I wanted to give them confidence to go out, and I gave them a lot of freedom.
Yep.
I gave them a lot of freedom, and man, they went hard. They were so much fun. And that changed me as a coach. And then becoming a father while I was there really changed me as a coach.
Right.
So
you guys were growing up. You were growing up yourself because you guys. How old were you when you came to UConn? Originally?
25.
25.
Oh, shit. Think about it, Dave. You had your son
26 that February, yeah. And I was a Division I line coach.
It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable.
I still, the biggest game for us that flipped it was beating New Hampshire in that opener.
Yes, I remember that. The field goal at the end, right?
They tried to hold the chains, and I was ripping the coaches. I was telling them that I was going to freaking break their leg for holding the chain.
The things we did when we were younger, Coach. The things we did on the sideline when we were younger, man.
Coach is actually young. Believe it or not, Coach coached for over 30 years, right?
Yeah.
So,
well, Coach, I mean, you got
he's only 50. What are you, 57? 57.
I'll be 58 tomorrow. I'm
young guy.
I am officially in my upper 50s.
You're a young guy, though, Coach. You're a young guy.
Coach, that's young. That's young, Coach.
When I have to scroll to the very last thing on an order and says your age, and there's only one more click left to be, 60 and over. I'm running out of, and then I got to scroll to 1967. So you don't just move your finger once or twice. When you got to scroll like it's a roulette wheel to get to your age.
Oh, that's hilarious.
The candles on the cake tomorrow will cost more than the cake.
Oh, is your birthday tomorrow?
Yeah.
Yeah, my birthday was on Saturday. Saturday, I just turned 51. 51 on Saturday.
Isn't that crazy? I just think we were.
Yeah.
I was like a grad student still when you.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Coach, you became a GA the second, as soon as you were done playing, you went right in being a GA.
Yeah. Well, guys, I was actually a college baseball coach first. I was a GA in baseball. I played at Notre Dame, and my coach was Pat Murphy, the manager of the Brewers.
Really?
One of the most influential guys in my life. And our little skinny third baseman as a freshman was Craig Counsell.
Oof.
Manager of the Cubs. So I was a baseball guy. I was doing analytics in football before it was cool.
Really?
Because of my
baseball. That's because everything in baseball is analytics, right? Is like
absolutely. It's so much.
Yeah. So I went from playing to coaching college baseball, and then Murph got me my first job out at Redlands in Southern California.
Okay.
And I was coaching college baseball and football for 2 seasons. And then Coach Holtz, I was coaching linebackers. And then Coach Holtz hired me back in 93 because he said, you need to go away for 2 years. That was his rule.
Right. Because
he hired me, I went in to meet with him at the convention in Atlanta. And I go up to his suite in the Marriott in Atlanta. I had a flashback to it because I was just there because that's where the team stayed for the championship this 2 weeks ago.
Right.
The marquee in Atlanta where the convention's been. And I go up to his room and he opens the door and he's pissed off. And I thought, oh, this is going to be great. Well, he had just gotten off the phone with Tommy Carter and Jerome Bettis, and they had just informed him they were leaving early to go to the NFL. So for 20 minutes, I get beat up. Everything he wanted to say to those two on the phone, he says. And then he turns in, he says, what's your goal? And I said, I wanted to be the linebacker GA. I want to be the next Barry Alvarez. I want to be the defensive coordinator at Notre Dame. I never said the head coach. I wanted an attainable goal. And that was a dream. He goes, okay, I'm going to hire you, but I'm going to move you to offense. And you're going to be Joe Moore's GA. And I must have got a look on my face because he went, you're wondering why. He said, when I was an offensive coach, Woody Hayes hired me, but he moved me to defense to coach in the secondary. And he said, that'll make you a better offensive coach. And I'm telling you, it's the best thing that ever happened to me. And,
it was the greatest thing that ever happened to me as a coach when I was I was at my old high school for 2 years.
Yeah.
And then I got a guy that I was friends with who in North Jersey. He's like now a legendary high school coach. And he says, I want to hire you as a special teams coordinator, but I want to also have you do the O-line and D-line. And the first 2 years of coaching, I coached wide receivers and DBs, I didn't. And he's like, you'll be fine. And he's like, I'll give you the scheme and you'll figure it out.
That's
and
right.
That 1 year as the offensive line coach, we won the state championship that year. And that 1 year, it was the difference in me being
Absolutely.
a very good coach or not.
Changed the way you looked at everything.
Everything changed. I never, you never had to figure out all these different moving pieces that were happening on the defense and getting like that concert dance that the linemen have to do together, and be able to be aggressive. And then the relationships, like I always say, like my favorite thing used to be, we used to tally like pancake everything, like not just grades, but like we had rewards for everything, and then we would go out to breakfast on Sunday. If we accumulated a certain amount of those things, I'd take them all to breakfast, and we would sit there at breakfast. And I tell people to this day, it was and I've done this with all the teams I coach, but there was nothing like when I was with the line, and we would sit there. First of all, you didn't have to worry about how much you were eating, what you ordered. There was nobody was judging anything. You got whatever you wanted, and you had a great time. You laughed your ass off. Oh.
And then those stay forever. For me to still be in contact with Richie Connors about defense, to be in contact when Pat Walsh's son was getting recruiting, to be able to talk to Pat about the development of his kid. I mean, those are the relationships you build in that unit that, even though things last a lifetime, there's just something different about that group. And for me, becoming a defensive coordinator, I got to the point where I used to stand. I was always on the field because you can't cook from the living room. You got to be down in the heat in the kitchen. So I would stand right at the line of scrimmage at just past the offensive line, so the defense could look right at me without turning around. But I would watch the offensive line at the snap. That's what I would watch. And just based off the first 3 steps they took, I knew the run play or the protection, but that also in my brain, I knew where those 7 guys or 8 guys were supposed to move. So I didn't have to watch the defense. I could watch the line and know where everybody was supposed to be without looking, because I understood it. And that was a gift that, even to this day, when I go visit guys and I talk to them, I'm like, do you realize what's going on here? You're not taking advantage of. All I wanted to do as a D coordinator was completely abuse the offensive line. That's all I wanted to do.
Right.
And once you did that, you changed everything.
Well, that's a great point. You once you coach the offensive line, you can know, like, if, without even looking at what happens, if the running back got tackled here, you already know, like, what was the issue. You already know what the issue, without even having to see exactly what happened. What gap did he get? Did he get through? Where? Okay. Who did what wrong? Or that's the interesting thing. I remember that as a younger head coach, like my line coach at the time, and I was teaching him, and he would be like, "How did you know?" You know, I'm like, I coach the offensive line, like I'm trying to teach you
Absolutely.
each step. And what I just know, if it came from here, like this was this person's mistake, and this guy didn't do X or Y, and it's so interesting. And then he started to learn that himself. He started to. I said, just stand. I always call it the apex, right? Like stand at an apex where you could see and get a feel for the picture with your peripheral vision without having to actually zone in. And you'll be able to get the whole picture at it. And it's It's
Yeah,
one
you
of those-
remember when you started, you turned the film on and you could only watch one guy. Now, I can see all 22 and I can still tell you where the referees are and the guy holding the change if his left or right foot's up or anything like that. You train your eyes to such a broad perspective of things, and it's true peripheral vision that grows as a coach. And you know what? It'll get rusty, but then for me, when I started watching all this film for the award, I mean, it never leaves you. I watch games on TV and I'll lean over to my brother and say, they're going to run this screen here into the boundary. And then they'll run it. He's like, how do you know that? I'm like, well, first of all, everybody in America on second and long runs a freaking screen, which I used to yell at the offensive coordinators. I've actually gone over to the phone on the sideline and said, if you run another freaking screen on second and long, bam.
It's funny, coach, because like I played safety in college, right?
Yeah.
And you're talking about the peripheral, right? So even like I watch it and it's like, how did you see that on the other side? I said, dude, I'm used to watching two verticals come down the middle, dude, playing one high, and I got to see both. You know what I'm saying? So it's really something that, and look, nobody can watch it. I can't watch a game with anybody who's not a football person because, I'm constantly run, pass, from looking at the end man on the line of scrimmage, determining what's going on, it's definitely something that, it never leaves you. Absolutely not.
No. And I got it so dialed down on attacking defenses that even with the award now, when I'm evaluating, I look at whose guards suck the least. I know the left tackle is going to be their best. I know the center is going to be the second best. And I know the right tackle is going to be the third. Then it's going to be usually the left guard who's young, but is probably going to move to left tackle eventually. I said, so chances are you're going to abuse the right guard, which is one of the reasons Texas's line was overrated because their right guard was terrible. And you just learn that perspective just from being an offensive line coach, because it affects the whole organization.
What did you think about your alma mater this year? I mean, I know you said said Marcus Freeman actually coached your son, right?
Yeah.
So and Derek, a little background. Believe it or not, when his son came out from Purdue, the guy who represented him for the NFL was actually me. That's when I was an agent, and
I remember those days. Those days when you were
and then he got his shot. He
got to put the helmet on and line up at the position that Dick Butkus did. That's what I actually have a picture I got from a friend that I gave to him, and it's got Butkus, Singletary, and Urlacher in it.
Really?
Wow.
Yeah, and they're autographed. And that's in his room, and then there's a picture of him during one of those practices at that position. I mean, who gets to say that? I didn't get to do it, But yeah, that was so good of you, Dave, to take care of my boy.
It was great. I mean, he's a great guy. Oh my God. Yeah. I mean, and by the way, All-American. I mean, a handsome guy, well built, great look. He's got it all, coach. He
plays middle linebacker in the Big Ten. He marries the cheerleader. I mean, it's like a Nicholas Sparks novel.
It is.
It's such a blessing. And
some of those guys are lucky like that.
Then he has a son and he names him Bo David. I just called that good parenting. They make him name his son Bo David.
He's set. Kids already won homecoming king.
Yeah. It's awesome. I've already got the kid a Harley picked out. So
yes, sir.
That's phenomenal.
It's awesome.
So I forgot my question because it was such a great dialogue. Marcus, what did you think about when Marcus Freeman came in? I'm curious what your thoughts were.
Yeah,
because obviously know him, and obviously what he was able to accomplish in a pretty short time period.
Well, I was at Minnesota.
Okay,
and I had this other linebacker committed to me for 6 months by the name of James Laurinaitis.
Ah, yes.
So he's committed to me. There's this other guy we're trying to recruit out of Dayton named Marcus Freeman. So I'd seen him since he was 16 on film, and Skip convinces, Skip's a good recruiter. Before I came to East Carolina, I left the Big Ten to go to East Carolina. People thought I was nuts, but he called Kelly, my wife, first and said, by the way, it's 70 degrees. Kelly's from Southern California. So she's like, we're going to East Carolina. And so I leave. 2 days later, Laurinaitis is a Buckeye. And then Freeman's a Buckeye. So I followed them, and I still have talked with James. Lo and behold, I take the Penn State job the Purdue job, and coach wants to bring his linebacker coach with him, and it's Marcus Freeman. I'm like, hell yeah. So the first time I meet with him, I get done meeting. I go down to coach's office. I said, we cannot let that guy leave no matter what, because his phone's going to start calling in about an hour. I said, this is a future star.
Right.
And I got to watch him. And what you see on television is not a Bill Belichick demeanor change. That is sincere. That is how Marcus is. I know him in his fired up personality, which you've seen in the tunnel and pregame or on the sideline, but that person that he is with the microphone in front of him at the press conferences or one-on-one after defeat and humiliation to the very highs that they were at, that's Marcus. And the other thing that I know that nobody else knows from a coaching standpoint is I know how he affected my son. That is more evidence than anybody could ask for to watch. If you see how somebody affects your child,
right,
in a positive or negative way, I mean, you talk about a barometer to gauge somebody off. And the communication that him and Garrett still have today consistently, for Joanna and Marcus to show up at Garrett's wedding and spend the day there and go to the reception and to be, a guy was, just so much about him. And
that's amazing.
The one thing, Marcus has got a little grinder in him, and then, he'd watch a lot of film and he'd stay, and I'd always stick my head in his office and say, husband, daddy, coach. And he is that way. And, the what you see is 100% exactly the truth. There's no show. And I'm really proud of him, and, just honored, he's a teammate of mine,
right,
as much as he is a friend. And we have a good dialogue, through the weeks, the ups and the downs. And I'll throw him a pointer or two or something like that, something about Notre Dame or to think about this. And he's so open to learning. He knows he's a developmental state still, and that job's in such a fishbowl, but he has the emotional stability within himself to handle that place the way it needs to be handled, because it can get a little overwhelming. And but his ego is good enough in check that he surrounds himself with good people.
That's
and
important.
And he listens. He's a great listener.
Yeah, one of the most important. And I think, to be honest, Coach, like one of the more underrated aspects of the game itself, I don't think a lot of people really understand. Look, everybody knows who the OC is, everybody knows who the DC is, but it's those positional guys at those higher levels that really are in the nitty gritty of it, holding those rooms together, especially in this day and age now where, you got to recruit your room every friggin' day, to keep those guys there. Those relationships that you build, even at the level, even as a high school coach, right? When those guys email you 5 years down the road and invite you to your wedding, like, I'm going, because, that's the type of relationship you want to have with those guys.
Exactly.
I just think that's really what holds it all together.
Yeah, it was a hell of a run for him. He did a great job.
Recruiting now is wild, and I'm curious, obviously, because from the time you played all the way to now, and I know that now even you're still involved in breaking down film and all that kind of stuff, and consulting with people.
Yeah.
Talk about and you had mentioned earlier when we were talking that you had advised even the NCAA on what they should be doing for the recruiting. Which, by the way, he'll tell you how that went. Talk about what you're seeing now in recruiting and kind of just, I guess, your overall general thoughts, and we can dive in from there.
Certainly. Well, I remember when it was really starting to crank up when we were at Florida State, and Jimbo was running the Nick Saban system, and and you've heard Nick say, I wanted to recruit my ass off because I wanted good players, because I've never been able to make a bad player good.
Right.
And he goes, that's why I just was so adamant about recruiting, is just getting overloaded with as much talent as possible. I remember saying one time, the guys kept talking about recruiting. And I finally said, recruiting? I said, we're not recruiting these guys. We're dating them. I said, this is high school dating with as much activity on the phone and the type of conversations we're having that don't have anything to do with football. And it's a lot of jargon. It's a lot of cool breezing. It's a lot of fluff. And that's where I also see a void. Glenn Mason told me something one time that I lean on. Some guys love coaching, but a lot of guys just love being the coach. And there's a lot of that. And a lot of people have been hired because they will get on the phone and socialize and date. And that is really, I think some of the coaching's dropped at some positions on that, to where you're hiring guys that can't even draw an X and a circle on a grease board in a straight line. I had a guy get up one time and drew an offensive lineup, and I was like, who's that, Michigan? Because those are the biggest circles I've ever seen. And guys draw 12 players up on the board and stuff like
all
that.
All the
time. But the recruiting has become every day more than it ever has been. And the re-recruiting of the guys in that room, I think a crew that you should look at in recruiting or hiring for a staff is get the guys from the academies, because they've been re-recruiting guys their whole lives. It is, after the sophomore year, you got to make that decision to where if you leave, you owe.
Yes.
And the guys want to leave after that first month or first day, and they're that first year or semester. I mean, those guys are re-recruiting at the academies all the time. And the creativity that you need, and then things are just so enticing now. There's the caveats that you're able to put out there to entice players to stay, which eventually I think will get streamlined. But
right.
It has never been more an everyday job, 365, 24/7 than it is now. And that's why you see these guys trying to get to the NFL in any capacity, even taking pay cuts.
Right.
Because I'm telling you, the month of June used to be a great month to be in coaching. The month of June is the worst month to be a coach in college now. When I went back to Notre Dame and we worked 30 straight days and all we did was have camps and recruit for 30 straight days, I was like, what are we doing? This is kids a sophomore I'm spending the day with.
Right.
And I'd rather spend the day with the guy that's going to tackle for me in August.
Right.
But that's what the masses wanted. They wanted everybody to be the same. They wanted everybody to get paid. They wanted this person, if they get this, then this person has to get it too. And you saw how that blew up everybody's face. And, the NCAA does not like football. And the reason is the NCAA doesn't make any money off of football.
Right.
They don't, it's not called the NCAA Tostitos Fiesta Bowl, but it is called the NCAA men's and women's basketball tournament or baseball, because they own it.
Right.
I call them the greatest beer league softball tournaments in the world. That's exactly what they are. They're fundraisers. They're money makers.
Right.
their Christmas basketball tournaments in the CYO, the Catholic Youth League, and they own them, but they don't own football. And why? Because they didn't want the liability.
Yep.
Okay. That never gets brought up.
Never.
Why would we own something that we know eventually we could get sued for? And they don't make any money. But now they realize that football is the problem. It's the monster, but it is the solution.
Yeah, right.
It is.
The cow. Yeah.
The head coach is the landlord. He makes, the most money, and the tenants got to pay. And television really took it to an astronomical level. I mean, I've sat in meetings and listened to a Big Ten athletic director say, this is not sustainable. This is not going to grow. There's going to be a ceiling. And it's more than doubled since I listened to that lunatic say that. I'm like, this will never stop.
Right.
College football actually, from a mathematical money standpoint, could pass the Notre Dame in value just because there's more Division I teams.
Right.
And there's more contracts. Just mathematically, it could catch up and even go by it. And as long as you keep playing games in Ireland and Europe in college football now, you'll be back playing them in the Tokyo Dome. And, it's going to be a global game.
Absolutely. And especially with the NFL trying to do that model now too, right? I mean, NFL Europe was one thing, and then it transit. Now you got games, in London on the regular. Now Germany, Mexico, right? I think they're doing one in Spain. Constant trying to grow this game on a global level. And look, there was nothing better for college football if they're trying to go international than having Notre Dame, Georgia Tech and Notre Dame in Ireland to start this whole thing off college football season, right? I mean, it's definitely what they're looking to do, and it kind of, continue to expand.
Well, to say, where the recruiting is, it is dating, and it's full speed and money's involved. The tough part is that's where a guy like Marcus and, a guy like Skip and these coaches that are being successful is you have to take 40 strangers on average a year, and in 5 to 6 months, get them playing for each other. And usually that takes 2 years.
Right.
To get a kid developed and all the way in the boat. And, now it's, much more transactional. Plug and play, one and dones. And, we've seen it in basketball. We get one and dones now in football all the time. And the transfer rule is not going to change. Why? Because, in the rule book, in the way they make rules, the NCAA is, if it happens for the student body, we need to follow that model. Well, the average student transfers more today than the student athletes do today.
Oh, that's interesting.
That's that's crazy.
Think about it. It takes 6 years for the average student to go to college now.
Right.
Well, they're going to sit out a semester. They're going to go to a community college. Well, then they're going to transfer from the private school to the in-state school. Then they're going to take a year off and work. And so they're in constant, kid, in California, you're going to go to a JUCO first before you go to UCLA just because of the 100%. And you'll transfer junior colleges 4 or 5 times. And, these guys transfer colleges. They'll hit the community college in town. So that rule's not going to change. They're going to keep having the transfer. Well, they'll transfer. They'll get down on the portal. Get that right. They'll get that albatross fixed because the one after the season's the real portal, and then usually the one in the springs become the were you asked to leave portal.
Right.
The cut guy portal.
Yeah.
That one they got to get rid of. So.
It's interesting with the portal too, because the whole case with the player from Wisconsin that just decided to leave school and said, I'm not going to uphold my NIL obligation because I'm going to withdraw, and then I'm going to enroll. Where do you enroll at? Miami.
Miami.
Yeah, Miami. and just enroll. And now I don't even have to use the transfer portal, which is a whole nother thing. And the other thing I saw that was wild, I don't think the second thing is going to go through, but I saw that there's a case where they're suing the NCAA. A Division II player says, lower levels than Division I shouldn't count towards your eligibility if you're going to go up to Division I, meaning, you already have the case with the player who was at JUCO, the Vanderbilt quarterback, Pavia. That already is like, it has an injunction where they're allowing him. But it's wild because the level of Pandora's box that has been open. Mm-hmm. It was easy to say, and the players should get financial compensation. I'm all for that. But the lack of parameters when they jumped into it, and the lack of any understanding of what, like the vision, that's the word. The lack of vision as to what could happen when they just decided to go forward is actually mind-boggling, because the scenarios that are now coming in are so wild and all potentially valid. Meaning, even though I disagree with a lot of these things, like the Division II, I could see each point out of it. Right? You could see the point from a player. If I'm looking from a player side, I could see the point, like, why is my clock ticking? I haven't gone up to the level that I should be at. Now, I disagree with it, but I understand when a lawyer's making a case on it, I understand what his case kind of is.
Yeah.
And they're basically all saying, like, if everybody's reclassing in high school and private school, and they're entering college now at 19, or they go to a prep school for another year. Right. How is that any different from me prepping at a JUCO and prepping at a D2? And that's kind of it's kind of a crazy rationale, but I could see it too. Like, I could see you're saying, okay, well, everybody's doing this already. Yeah. How is this any different? This is just all schooling, right? This is just all some version of schooling that they're leveraging to play at the next level, which is essentially
they're all leveraging to try to get money.
Right, of course. Of course.
The other thing I hope is being being able to say, where are these kids academically? Are we maintaining satisfactory progress to be eligible? I think that's the caveat that really needs to get talked about more and made stronger, is your satisfactory progress rule, your number of classes that you have to take a semester, and the number of classes that you're only allowed to take online, where you only have 50%, and the number you have to take each semester in order to be eligible. I think the academic part gets driven home and held to more accountability, because guys are taking trips for visits and they're enrolled in the previous school already. And they showed the schools showed their hands when they, where academics is right now, because when Notre Dame and Indiana both changed the graduation times on the day of that game, the academia people on campus went ballistic.
I could only imagine.
They made decisions about Indiana's midterm graduation and Notre Dame's. They changed the time of it.
Wow.
So people could see and attend that game.
Yeah.
So it shows you where the priority was.
Right.
For a school like Notre Dame to be in that mix, I think they're going to be able to make decisions on changing the portal and transfer times and status and consistent eligibility, working towards satisfactory progress towards a degree, and being able to say, hey, we have to keep this standard of academics alive. I think that's a point that needs to be refocused on.
Yeah, because otherwise you're just a pro team with a college name.
Yeah. And you 100%. Can't just say, well, I'm gonna get close to graduation and I'm gonna go play in the UFL, for a few years. There's only so many spots there.
Right.
And that, that could drop at any time. You never know.
Yeah, right.
As long as Skip Holtz keeps winning championships, the three-peat originator in football.
I know.
I mean, hey, they just put up
row.
a building, and they just put up a building and stapled it that this is our headquarters. So that's like a move in the right direction. It's a big move for these guys,
I know. I'm excited to go to some games this year for that. But it is a little Wild West. Barry Switzer was correct when he said NIL stands for now it's legal. And
shit, those guys have been giving out duffel bags for years.
Yeah, and you don't need poker chips anymore, which were a good way to fund a player, completely untraceable. And make sure that player.
I love that. When you told me that poker chips.
You just can't have the player walking in the casino, getting on the camera to cash in a chip and never go up to a table. So
yeah, come on, man, play one game or something, man. Like, come on,
you got to get the girlfriend or somebody in there.
Somebody's got to play a game.
I heard that went on. Not that I.
Right. Oh, no, don't worry, Coach. You're good.
Coach,
what is it? Statute of limitations? You're all good.
Hey, man, they can't get me. Even if they could, I'd tell them what I'd say to them.
Yeah, I know. There's no doubt.
Yeah.
My favorite, I read the Bosworth's book when I was in high school. He told all in there. But one of the funniest things ever, he was talking about how Baylor, and I always laugh because Grant Taft was the head of the
AFCA.
But Grant Taft was one of the guys that was like, was giving bags of money to try to get Oz to go there.
The old Southwest Conference. You remember Greg Williams?
Yeah, of course.
Ace?
Yeah.
He was at TCU when they were.
He was.
And he told me a couple stories. He said, I used to call everybody, hey, buddy.
Hey, buddy.
He said, hey, buddy, I'm just going to tell you, many times I got on a Lear jet with a briefcase with about 10 grand in it, and I just go recruiting.
Spread accordingly.
That's right.
Well, I thought it was so funny when Boz said that all those guys were flying them all over, dropping bags of money. And then Barry Switzer comes in. And I'm sure he had his own version of money, but he came into the cafeteria and he had his fur coat on and, dressed in line.
Where's Boz?
Yeah, where's Boz? And he said, you want one of these? And he was like, he had his ring up and,
his rings.
And that's when Boz was like, okay, I think this is the guy that I'm going to go play for.
This is the place I want to go.
Yeah.
Barry Switzer, man, he is a beauty. I bumped into him at a convention standing there leaning at the bar in the lobby. I just went up to get some drinks and ended up standing there for 3 hours with Barry Switzer. And he looked at my sweater and he said, you're one of Mason's boys, huh? In Minnesota. And now they were together, and friends when he was in Kansas. What you talk about somebody, you got to get him on this podcast because you need about 4 hours.
Who, Coach Mason?
Oh my God, Barry Switzer would be the stories that guy could tell. He needs to get recorded. He is a beauty.
It's unbelievable.
I'll tell you, what's awesome, Coach, is like you talk about, hey, I mean, you've literally listed off guys that have, contributed to your career and your success and everything at every stop. I think that's one of the things about, being in this coaching world, this fraternity, this like brotherhood type of networking. I tell guys all the time, even at my level, there's not a job that I haven't applied for or gone to, whether it was in education or not, whether it was in coaching or not, that football and the coach that I have played for or a coach that I've played for hasn't been, somewhat part of that, right? Even when you're applying for jobs. Even when I would apply for a job that had nothing to do with football, right? My reference was my head football coach. Like
I never made a decision without talking to Barry Alvarez. Yeah, that was my first call. Something got approached to me, boom, I'd call Coach. And that's who I leaned on. He was in Murph, with the Brewers. He was at Arizona State for a number of years. If I had something on the table, I'd call those two and ride or die. Heck, Murph and I are such Bruce Springsteen fans. We text each other just with song lines. That's all we'll send. He sent one the other day. He says, how you doing? It's hard to be a saint in the city. That's our text.
Coach, we live about 15 minutes from the boss's house.
Oh, I'm coming to visit you because
Very, very cool. He's Colt's neck, right? Is he Colt's
Yeah,
neck?
he's like
Yeah.
a cult down here. These guys down here, they are all the boss was in the bar the other day, or hey, he hit the Wawa.
man.
We're like, what's going? Okay, like it's been a little bit of an adjustment, but we've been down here for a while now, so
Yeah.
we're into this whole shore culture. Central Jersey.
We're beach bums now.
We are, man. We sell out. We sold out.
That's why I'm here in Carolina half the time. I can sniff the Atlantic, buddy.
That's it.
That's why they call them the pirates here, man. I turned everybody wanted to be a pirate as a kid growing up, and I'm one now for life. So
it's interesting, right? Because we actually just had a former player that just did a year there. He's since transferred out, but he went down there from Jersey, kind of like on a whim, like, hey, I'm gonna get out of here. I like this kind of place. We're gonna go check it out. Yeah, you don't get many Jersey cats going down to that school, but hey, with the way things are nationally, and we talk about this all the time too. It used to be somewhat regionalized recruiting, right? Your Big Ten kind of recruited this thing, and the SEC kind of recruited this. Now, I mean, look, you got USC in the Big Ten. I mean,
people would ask me, like, when I was at Notre Dame or Florida State, like, what's your recruiting area? I was like, the greater metropolitan United States.
Yeah.
That's my area. Pete Carroll and those guys, when they were at USC, they were the first to really come to Florida and Texas and start
Jersey. They grabbed the top kid in Jersey for a couple of years when he was there, right? Remember Dave, Dwayne Jarrett, Brian Cushing,
sent Ogeron out, and
that's it.
He sent Ogeron out. He comes in with a player.
He might have a bag of poker chips on him. You never know.
Yeah, he might support him. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, a lot of Red Bulls. Or maybe stronger, from what I understand.
Wait, you're gonna pay me what to not be LSU's head coach? Absolutely. See you guys later. Have a good one.
There's a folklore story I heard on Coach Ogeron that he was a GA at the Catholics versus Convicts game for the Hurricanes.
Mm-hmm.
Rumor has it he got to the game by cab in the morning.
Yeah, he was on that level, Coach. I think he was asked to step away, I believe, from Miami for those issues, I believe, if you want to call them that.
A funny story about my sister, who's now the athletic director of UMass Boston, but when she was in Tennessee's department at that time, and she was working under Mike Hamilton, who since passed away. And when they came in, that whole staff at Lane Kiffin and Ed Orgeron and that crew came in for like a year.
Yeah.
And my sister came in there and was meet with Ed about something, and he had a refrigerator, and it was. She said to him, "Oh my God, you have so many." I think it was Red Bulls, but it was something like that. Red Bulls in here. He goes, "Well, honey," he goes, "at least they're Red Bulls now. Back in the day, there was something a lot stronger."
Oh, yeah. They might have had a goose involved in there somewhere.
She tells me that story all the time. I said, that's hilarious. I said, there's no doubt he had to be able to recruit all the time. So, had to be able to do the job. But it's really, really interesting, talking how recruiting is, and talk a little bit about how football has kind of connected to what you're doing now, and that whole kind of transition.
Absolutely. You probably are doing the same thing with all you both have the entrepreneurial spirit that I have. I tell people, I'm like, guys, they're like, oh, you're helping run, or you're running this company for these guys. And, how did you, I'm like, I am doing nothing different than being the defensive coordinator at Notre Dame. My product now is food and beverage, and not student athletes in a university. There's nothing, Coach Holtz did a video years ago in the 80s, which was the highest selling business motivational video, called Do Right. And it was all about how to athletics transfers into the business world. And I remember being an undergrad, these CEOs would come in and visit Coach, and these guys that were major players in business, and because they want to know, how did you motivate your team? How did you keep them together? What did you do when you had a crisis? How did you hold people accountable without kicking them to the curb and beating them to a pulp? How did you motivate? What was your creative thinking like? So I still have my daily must that I must do every day in business that I had to do in football. My call sheet is just my ready sheet that I have when I'm going to meet with a client. My blitzes may be this part of the sales. My base defense may be this part of the sales. My zone blitzes are this part of the sales. My red zone are the really critical part of the sales. It is absolutely the same thing, that they're both products. They're just, they're made differently. But, Coach said in that video, if you want to be a successful company, you got to just give people what they want. And with a player, it's giving them motivation, it's giving them confidence, and it's giving them the opportunity to succeed, but it's also holding them accountable. It's also, maybe the only thing I remember from the Notre Dame Business School is the fortunes in the follow-up. And it's to make sure you follow up, and you know what? Pick the phone up and make the call. Steve Jobs said the most important thing he learned is he's called it make the effing call, but I got that. I've got that on my board over here. Make the call, and customer says, manufacturer does. And it's no different. Player wants this, or head coach says, assistant coach does. And it's no different. It translates exactly the same. And I treat it also just like, I'm in the first quarter of the business right now, the business year. We got to start, have a great start. We're going to have the middle 8 of the game, the last couple weeks of the second quarter and the first couple weeks of the third quarter. It all translates to the same thing. And the main thing it does is it holds everybody accountable, and it's organized. And I ran a simple defense. I said on the beginning, I have Prop 48 tendencies. I had to have a simple defense because I had to remember it to call it correctly and not screw it up. My number one job was to not screw up the game. And that was by having too much junk and not being simple, not being sound, not being fundamental. Explosive plays, tackling are two of the most important things in winning a game. Two most important. Why aren't you working on tackling more if it's one of the top 3 things to winning a football game? So I worked on tackling a lot. Well, I have to do that in the business world. My tackling is getting to people and getting a commitment from them to buy. And it's no different. And I'll say that to my grave, that, sports and business are probably so transparent of each other because of the accountability factor to succeed.
No doubt about it. And I've also enjoyed your show. I watched a couple episodes of the Greg Hudson show, and it's really cool stuff that you're doing there. You're staying involved that's the East Carolina network, right? Is that
Pirate Radio?
Pirate Radio. I mean, it's cool stuff because you guys talk about everything, not just what's going on recruiting, but you talk about everything there.
Yeah, it's the first part of it is it's a sports theme, but there's a back story for mental health with every single person that comes on there. And if you watch the one with Aaron Taylor, that'll knock your socks off.
Oh, well.
And with Scotty Robinson, everybody, we all have a story. I have a story. I live a life of recovery. And my relationship with God has changed to keep me on the straight and narrow. But it is then my responsibility to help somebody else. And that's a way, I have a platform like you guys have a platform. Somebody may hear this and hear me say that. That's the power of it. And I really enjoy speaking to those people because, the other thing it does, it keeps you humble.
Yep.
And that's the other thing that sports does to you that business might not. Sports will humble you so fast and so hard, but still give you an opportunity to pick yourself back up and keep going. And that's how I equate it. And that's how I keep going.
So yeah, that's always been my favorite part about sports. It's not just about when you're dominating. It's about when you get knocked down. Are you going to be willing to get up and keep doing it and keep coming back? And are you willing to take chances, on yourself and your team? Like, it's one of the things that we always try to tell kids, like, man, you know what? Like, if you don't take that chance, what happens?
Right.
Absolutely nothing happens. So you might as well take that chance. Take that chance and go for it. And you know what's the worst thing that happens when you take that chance? We could always bring you back and say, hey, do this differently. But if you're not willing to take that chance, I can't even coach you. I can't even coach you if you're not willing to take that chance.
One of the biggest things and problems with mental health and in recovery in that life is regret. Regret is deadly.
Yeah.
And when people get really down and they load up with regret and they have nowhere to turn, bad things happen. And that's where the inspiring coach can help somebody, either get through regret or keep them from having regret because of opportunity they present to them, and also holding them accountable to follow through on it.
It's a great point. In the sport that, we're involved in, football is so dynamic. It's so many highs and lows. There's the levels of excitement as a player, as a coach, like it's almost impossible to mimic that in your regular day life, right?
Yeah.
So it's very important for people around the game to really understand the things that can help you mentally to be able to stay grounded, because it is like, people are like, oh, what is it like, playing and being able to, I'm like, it's very hard. It's hard to explain, because I can't explain what it's like to somebody when something goes incredibly well for you and you're literally on top of the world. And then I can also explain to you, I can't explain to you how low it is when you expected yourself to do something great and you just didn't reach that, right? Like, and it happens to all football players, even when you look at the best football players and best coaches like Saban or Holtz or Tom Brady, even the things they a lot of times will talk about is not the phenomenal successes they had, which are so abounded, but the 1 or 2 or 3 moments when it didn't work out.
Oh, it's how comfortable can you get in being a little bit miserable?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
There was a guy training my first year at Minnesota. I go one of the first times I went over to the weight room to work out, and there's this Neanderthal that this little short guy a coach was just beating him to a pulp. He was exercising and doing all this lifting and plyometrics and up and down and pulling a rope. And I'm going, this is wild. I'm just watching it. First of all, the guy was a specimen. So they take a break and I walk over and I asked the coach, I said, introduce myself. I said, I got to ask you. I said, you got finished for about 20 minutes there of just really grinding this guy. And then you said, okay, take a break and then we'll get started. And I was like, what? He said, I have to find out what this guy's willingness to suffer is. When I get him to that point, then I can train him. Then I can really teach him and coach him. The guy was Brock Lesnar. And that never left me about what is your willingness to suffer, to get through those hard times, or then to be comfortable in that misery of August.
Yep.
Right.
To get comfortable in this is really sucks. And this is really hard. And to be honest, if I had to answer in the court of law, if you said, do you really want to be here? I'd say probably no.
Yep.
But my willingness to do it because of what I know it can do for me is what keeps me in it. And that's and then I have found that in a life that I lead now of clarity, that I didn't know how good it can actually be, and living that type of life in a different way. So
no doubt about it. Very, very powerful stuff. Coach, I can't thank you enough for coming on. We'll connect later on today too as well.
Yeah, let's do that.
Definitely we'll do that. And it's been an absolute pleasure.
By the way,
you not only do you have a voice for coaching, but you definitely have a voice for like any kind of pilot. You got that voice, that soothing voice, deep soothing voice, gets people to want to listen to you. And I can't thank you
for radio.
Hey man,
Coach, I appreciate it. It was awesome to meet you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it, Coach.
Yeah, I look forward to staying in touch. And Coach Holtz told us. Yeah, Coach Holtz Sr. said, friends come and go, but your teammates they last a lifetime. And I can tell you that, I have found that out in the last 5 years, how true that is. And you guys will see that as you creep up to the upper 50s like I am tomorrow. But this reconnection is what my whole career has been about. It's being able to coach the guys, but to still be teammates for life. Because talking to Dave and meeting Derek, it's to me, Shu, this is like the next day.
Yep.
That gap is not in there.
Yep.
Nope.
And we got a lot more to do, and hopefully we can do some things together. There's a lot of people out there we can help.
There's no doubt about it. And happy birthday, Coach.
You too. Yeah, Coach. Enjoy it, buddy. Get those candles early.
Oh yeah. All right, guys.
All right.
I'll talk to you soon. All
Thanks,
right.
Coach.
Absolutely. Have a great day, Coach.
You too. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye. That was fantastic. That was great.
It's so funny, Dave, to see your relationship with Coach as the O-line guy, right? And then we've had Coach Joffrey on here, my relationship with an O-line guy, and neither of us played O-line, right? Like neither of us played O-line. It's just that's certain, and I don't know if it's O-line coaches or what that appeal is, right? It's just I don't know. We flock to them. They're easily. I don't know. It's like people want to be around those types of guys, and they're gonna grind you. They're gonna push you. They're gonna take you to that next level. You're gonna not dislike them at some point, but at the end of it, they're just a genuine type of dude that's gonna be in your corner. That's gonna back you. That's gonna support you, and they're just. Whether it's it's an O-line thing, I guess. You know what I mean? Those guys are
you can coach. Bro. I think either once you coach the O-line or in order to be a good offensive line coach, you have to be able to be real with those guys, because those guys, of anybody, they get no glory, right? So none. So they have
you talk about having to massage certain guys or push certain guys or teach them to do. Yeah. But you're also, Dave, you're also always working with 5 guys, right?
Right.
You're not working with one receiver or 2 corners. You're working with 5 dudes that have to, like you say, have to be together, like that correlation of everybody working together for one goal. So even the 11 on offense, you still have to get your 5 to do their, you know what I mean? It's a different, not to mention everybody says you want to learn to be the best coach the O-line, right? And that's going to take you to a whole different level.
Look, for me, and coach, it happened to him, obviously, and he was a great O-line coach and he was young at the time.
Dude, 25?
And he had, we always talk about that era, because I talk about with the younger guys that are UConn alumni now, that I do a lot of stuff with, which I'm going on a show right after this with. But when I talked to him, the era that I was there, like I said, we had enormous guys. We were always. I don't know how they did it, how they found those guys, but they did a great job of finding these guys that, who knows what it was. Could have been academic, could have been the guy Walsh that he talks about was legitimately 6'9", 330. But when he came on the recruiting trip with me, he was a basketball player. So who wasn't quite good enough to get recruited. And he was on the recruiting trip, he was 6'9", about 250. So you could see why the division, the highest level, didn't take him, because they didn't know, could he get big enough? You know what I mean? Heavy, thick enough. And
they were ahead of their time. Your coaches were ahead of the time in terms of hey, we're going to go with it this way. And now you see that all the time, right?
Yeah, they went to you know who was the one of the next people I really see apply that philosophy at the Division I level, and it actually worked out very well for him. And now he's at Texas as the I guess he's the OC. As Flood. Flood used to have people used to always be like, why does Flood just go after these enormous guys in Rutgers? Right? Remember that? And he would get these.
I saw it firsthand at Mount Olive. He came
Right.
in, recruited Zach Heeman, who was a center on the basketball team. He watched him run up and down the court for the first half and offered him at halftime off of watching a basketball game. And look, Zach right now, who's he's at Wisconsin now as a GA, but he was always the biggest guy on Rutgers for all of those years. But that's what he recruited. Like, this is not that he was a bad football player. It's just he was just a basketball first guy until it was like, hey, bud, like this might be the sport for you.
Well, I think the philosophy of that you could make the argument that if you're gonna miss big, right, on the line. So
no pun intended.
No. If you miss with the right size versus taking. I
think you're okay.
Yeah. Like they're not gonna fire you right away for that. But yeah, no, it was great talking with Coach. He
great dude. That's awesome.
Oh yeah, I mean, unbelievable. And it's funny because and I had to bring it up on the podcast because I forgot about it. But I remember the year before we won that walk-off field goal against New Hampshire. The next year we were like rated really high, like 8 or 7 in the country, right, and New Hampshire went up on us like 14-0 or something early on, and they had a great running back that played in the pros for many years as a DB. By the way, he was such a good athlete that he moved over to DB. Cool. But so at halftime we come in there and he was fired up. Coach was fired up, and we get our drinks, and then he just got all over us, and we're ready to run out, and we're about to run right out on the field, and the officials go, "Hold on, you guys have another 10 minutes."
Oh damn!
It was a killer.
What's the break?
It was a killer because we were like all lined up, and they're like, "You got another 10 minutes." I don't know what it was. It was for some reason the halftime was. I don't remember what it was a little bit longer, and so we go to run out. And they're like, "No, you got another 10 minutes." We were like, "Ah!" And they hung. And we still came back, but they hung on for dear life, and they beat us. But it was but he was such a motivator. Oh my God.
You could tell. I mean, look, you could tell, like you'd run through a wall for him, which is why, a lot of those guys transition very well to, defensive coordinators and whatnot. And also how many times, like we talk about it because we did it, right? In terms of, look, like you're coaching this, but I'm putting you on the other side of the ball. And how many times does that benefit you in the long run for, hey, you're coaching safeties and DBs and now you're going to go do receivers, and then vice versa. Coach Melody that we had on from Cedar Creek talked about, I was a quarterback forever. Coach Agresta put me on defense, changed everything I see, offensively, right, and whatnot. So it's definitely awesome. What a great dude.
Awesome. So we got a big week. I think we're every day.
Every day.
So tomorrow we have who? What do we have
tomorrow? Let me double check because we literally have somebody every day. Tomorrow is Mark Hoover, who's going to talk about
he's a cat.
Another guy, another one of those guys that we're getting a lot of them now. But he's more about creating. How do you make practice as close to a game as possible through a science that he's kind of developed, which is pretty freaking awesome. I took a look at it. Our viewers are in for a treat. Let's put it that way.
That's cool. I can't wait for that. All right.
Awesome.
Well, till tomorrow.